Welcome to the Aboriginal channel. On this episode, we're going to be taking a look at a guy named Paul Manafort. So this dude right here is a former lobbyist, political consultant, lawyer, and convicted felon of tax and bank fraud. It says that on May 13th, Manafort was released to home confinement due to the threats of COVID-19. Now, Paul Manafort was arrested with another guy by the name of Rick Gates. That's this guy right here who received probation and weekend jail sentence. It says Russia investigation, indictment, and arrest. On October 27, 2017, Gates and Manafort were indicted by a federal grand jury as part of the special counsel investigation into Russia interference in the 2016 United States elections and related matters. It says a 12-count indictment charges the two men with conspiracy against the United States, making false statements, money laundering, and failing to register as foreign agents for Ukraine as required by the Foreign Agents Registration Act. Now, this is the part right here. It says they charges arise from his counseling work for a pro-Russian government in Ukraine and are not related to the Trump campaign. Now, up here it says that the charges stem from federal grand jury as part of the special counseling and investigation into Russian interference into the 2016 United States elections. Who got elected in 2016? Trump. So this indictment was exactly their involvement in the Russian interference in the 2016 United States elections. But it tells you a lie down here that they weren't related to the Trump campaign. When you go back over to Manafort, it says he was prosecuted in two federal courts. In August of 2018, he stood trial in the Eastern District of Virginia and was convicted on 8 charges of tax and bank fraud. Manafort was next prosecuted on 10 other charges, but this effort ended in a mistrial with Manafort later admitting his guilt. So right there, he got charged. He's a convicted felon of tax and bank fraud. But that was it. The other 10 charges, they gave him a mistrial. But while facing these charges, it says that Robert Mueller reported that Manafort violated his plea deal by repeatedly lying to investigators. It says the judge on March 2019 sentenced Manafort to 47 months in prison. On March 13, 2019, Judge Amy Berman Jackson sentenced Manafort to an additional 43 months in prison. Minutes after his sentencing, New York State prosecutors charged Manafort with 16 state felonies. On December 18, 2019, which was a few months ago, about 5 months ago, the state charges against him were dismissed, citing double jeopardy laws. The man did about a year in jail and got out. But right here it says Manafort pled guilty to 2 charges of conspiracy to defraud the United States and witness tampering. Now, I'm not the expert, but witness tampering in a federal case can get someone 10 to 20 years. But basically, they let this man out due to threats because he's a little older. He's 71 years old. So I'm figuring they should be letting Bill Cosby out of prison soon, right? But back to this, the guy Paul Manafort has a long, lengthy history of being corrupt. Right here in the late 1980s, Manafort was criticized for using his connections at HUD to ensure funding for a $43 million rehabilitation of dilapidated housing in Seabrook, New Jersey. Seabrook, New Jersey is in Cumberland County, New Jersey, and Cumberland County has a 62% white population. So when it says that he used his connections to ensure funding for $43 million to rehabilitate a dilapidated housing, he was pretty much using that money to help his own people out there in New Jersey. But down here it says that Manafort also worked as an advisor to the Ukrainian presidential campaign of Viktor Yushchenko. So Manafort was already tied into the Russians. It says right here in April 2016, an interview with NBC News, Manafort stated that the aim of his activities in Ukraine had been to lead the country closer to Europe. That was in 2016, but in 2013, it says, according to leaked text messages between his daughters, Manafort was also one of the proponents of violent removal of the Euromaidan protesters, which resulted in police shooting dozens of people during 2014 Hershkowo street riots. In one of the messages, his daughter writes that it was his strategy that was to cause that, to send those people out and get them slaughtered. So this man's own daughter said that it was his strategy that sent the people out to get them slaughtered. And this is the man that was released yesterday to home confinement due to threats of COVID-19. Now, there's a lot of questions right here, like who sets the criteria for one who is to be released due to threats of COVID-19. I'm saying this man is 71 years old. I'm sure there's other 81, 91-year-old people in prison that meet that criteria. And one could also question this to be the purpose for the COVID outbreak itself, was to get these people right here out of prison. If you Google prisoners released early due to coronavirus, it says that over 16,000 U.S. inmates have been released. Now, if one were to look inside of that 16,000, I'm sure other key persons like Paul Manafort can be brought up and examined. So to bring this thing 360, right here it says that upon Manafort's resignation as campaign chairman, so he was Trump's campaign chairman, Newt Gingrich stated, "Nobody should underestimate how much Paul Manafort did to really help get this campaign to where it is right now." So basically, the Trump campaign, the Trump administration has Paul Manafort to thank for him being elected. Basically, that's what this is saying. Now, go back to the fact that in one of the messages, his daughter writes that it was his strategy that was to cause that, to send those people out to get them slaughtered. So basically, he was a man of strategy. Now, it should be noted that it says right here, a longtime Republican Party campaign consultant. He chaired the Trump presidential campaign team from June to August of 2016. Manafort served as an advisor to the U.S. presidential campaigns of Republicans Gerald Ford, Ronald Reagan, George H.W. Bush, and Bob Dole. Now, what is Bob Dole known for? Right here it says, the biggest scandal of Dole's political career is his consistent and intense pattern of doing political favors for big political contributors. And right now, this man is 96 years old. We already know about Reagan and Herbert, but another guy is Gerald Ford, who stepped in for Richard Nixon when Nixon resigned due to his Watergate scandal, which the campaign director of President Richard Nixon was also involved in the scandal. But going back over here to Paul Manafort, this dude right here, it says ex-Trump campaign boss Paul Manafort released as coronavirus spreads in prisons. Although the prison he was at did not have not one case. Let's go give Gerald a look real quick. He was the 38th U.S. president. And right over here, it says his vice president was Nelson Rockefeller. Nelson Rockefeller is a grandson of billionaire John D. Rockefeller. One other piece of information that should be added to this is that when you look up the 41 presidents and do a mortality rate comparison for every 10, the first 10 averaged about 77 years on Earth. The next 10 presidents averaged about 64. The next 10 averaged 67. And then the 10 currently, or the last 10, are at 83 years, with the last 4 starting with Gerald Ford, Jimmy Carter, Ronald Reagan, and Herbert Bush, all in their 90s. And that's unprecedented for presidents and white folks in general. And that is why I pointed out the fact that Bob Dole is 96 years old. So this thing is called Aronagate because this guy was let out of prison. In Watergate, Richard Nixon was offered a deal to resign and he wouldn't have to go to jail. And he would actually be pardoned by Gerald Ford, the president that took the office after him, upon his resignation. And the Watergate was a 1972 failed break-in of the Democratic National Committee headquarters at the Washington, D.C. Democratic office. So there was also a cover-up going on right there as well. The contents of those documents, I'm not sure what they consisted of, but I'm sure it's directly connected to what these people were doing in the 1970s. And then recently, President Trump called the coronavirus Obamagate, and he's the biggest symbolic deflector of all times through the history books, which has all been a lie. So therefore, if it's a lie, then what's the truth? If it's a lie, then what's the